people think of the women's rights movement, the early one at least, you're instantly drawn to the suffragettes. And that makes total sense and is perfectly acceptable, because without winning the right to vote in 1918, none of the subsequent acts that benefited women would have come to pass. But there were several women that underpinned that 1918 law by contributing to legislation that was passed in the 19th century that benefited women's lives in so many different ways. One of these women was Caroline Norton. Now, she was somebody that was trapped in an unhappy marriage, but used all of the knowledge that she gained from that, all of her personal experience, to bring about real legislative change. So who was she? Well, she was the granddaughter of Richard Sheridan, the playwright, so her maiden name was Caroline Sheridan. When she was only 19 years old, she was married to George Norton, who was from a gentry family in Scotland and was due to inherit a title. From the offset, the marriage was very unhappy. George was very emotionally abusive and physically abusive often, and extremely jealous of the fact that Caroline was a very beautiful and very successful author and socialite in London, so much so that she caught the eye and the friendship of Lord Melbourne. Now, George was happy to exploit their friendship to take a seat in Parliament, but otherwise he was very unhappy about their relationship, and he actually tried to sue Lord Melbourne for something called criminal conversation. Now, this was when a man felt that their wife was sleeping with somebody else and was therefore removing their conjugal rights. So George was suing Lord Melbourne for taking away Caroline's body from his constant use. Now, George was unsuccessful in this trial, although it did damage Caroline's reputation quite a bit. Now, Caroline was free from George from this point, but she had no rights of her own. As she said in one of her pamphlets, "I exist and I suffer, but the law denies my existence." So, although she had 3 children with George, she had no access to them. She tried to snatch time with them, but was often removed. She couldn't even rent a house without having a male family signature, which would normally be the husband. So what did Caroline do? Well, she began pamphleteering and lobbying members of Parliament, and finally, in 1839, the Infant Custody Bill was passed in Parliament, and children under the age of 7 years old could be in the custody of their mother for the first time. Now, Caroline didn't stop there. She wanted to fight for women's rights when it came to divorce, and she kept lobbying until finally, in 1857, the Matrimonial Causes Act was passed, which meant for the first time, ordinary women had access to divorce. They could divorce in secular courts rather than hard ecclesiastical ones, and finally it was more affordable for ordinary women. Now, again, Caroline didn't stop, and finally she was involved in the 1870 Married Women's Property Act, which directly led and was used in the campaign by the suffragettes up until 1918. So that's 3 different acts that Caroline contributed to, and it was direct. 4 of the clauses in the 1857 Matrimonial Causes Act were drawn directly out of Caroline's pamphlets. That's how much of an effect that she had. The Infant Custody Bill is described by Diane Atkinson as the first ever piece of feminist legislation. So why don't we know more about her? Well, we can draw inspiration from her tenacity and her ability to use personal experience to bring about real change. Now, if you'd like to know more about Caroline, there's a fantastic Future Learn course on the internet about her. It's called Beyond the Ballot. It's about women from throughout history, and she has a section in that. There's also this book called The Criminal Conversation of Mrs. Norton by Diane Atkinson, which is absolutely brilliant and really readable. So we're going to continue on this theme next week, where I'm going to be talking about Josephine Butler and the impact she had on 19th century feminist law. Thank you.